Good morning, students. In this present lecture, I would like to contextualize the policy initiatives, okay, which I have in the previous lecture. Actually, I tried to initiate or introduce, outline the energy transitions to contextualize the policy initiatives. In this present class, I would like to contextualize the policy initiatives in the energy sector. In India, there are three contexts you can look at it, or we can formulate, or we can derive. The first context is in the post-independence period. Or with advent of the independence, what kind of an initiatives the government of India had taken. Okay. The next context is with reference to 1973 oil crisis. The context is 2008 with reference to the financial crisis, as well as coming to a kind of the consciousness of the resources scarcity and the climate change. There's all of the three different phases we can try to take or formulate out of the history, and basically what I'm going to do is that I will be able to start in the middle. Okay, that means I'll be start somewhere in the middle of the past, and from there I'll be moving into the present. Okay, and by understanding the present, once again I'll be going back to the independence, to the post 1950s. Okay, or in the context of the 1950s, I'll be able to explain the energy scenario. So basically, what is the purpose of this is that to know, for instance, basically the contextualization, which means which refers to the various set of factors that influenced the policy initiatives. Or the policy formulation. Okay, and then we will also try to understand what is the implication of this policy initiatives. Okay. On the one hand, the context, which we can call it as, it is a kind of an ex ante factors, ex ante position. And once the policy has been taken, and this will be, this comes under the ex post facto. This ex ante is through the context, okay, or the context as the frame of reference. We try to take certain initiatives, certain policy initiatives, or acts, or programs, or schemes. Okay, so it's a kind of this works as a frame of reference for forecasting what could be the scenario in the near future. That means the ex ante deals with the forecasting scenarios. And eventually, the ex post facto is that it's an actual result. Which we are trying to retrospectively analyzing it. It's a retrospective analysis. analysis of what kind of a policies we have taken in the past and what is the implications of the present. Okay, what kind of consequences which we are facing at right now. So basically, I'll be moving like this. The first, I'll start with this 1973 oil crisis. I'll explain the context, and then I'll be moving on to the next context, which starts with 2008, and I'll be able to explain that particular context very clearly. And then I'll be coming back in the context of the post-independence, what kind of a debates which happened, and then I'll elaborate it. From there, I'll start the policy analysis. Okay, I'll be moving from one phase, that means 1950s to 1973 or 1991, till that period of time, and then from there, I'll be moving on to the 2008 and the present. So if you could able to look at the policy initiatives in the historical frame, or it's in the kind of a historical trajectory, you will be able to better understand the relations between the historical understanding could let light on the various aspects which we are trying to look at it. One is that the profit maximization or utility maximization, the state intervention, the state versus the market, and for instance, like the politics in the resources allocations and the decision making, and in which context the public or the common right now they are actually like. So these all are some of the things we are trying to interrogate or we are trying to analyze. Okay, and then for basically the question is that how the heterogeneity of an actor's interest emerged, and eventually did the government follow the optimality in the energy sectors or what. So these are some of the questions we have in mind. For those questions or for those aspects, looking at the historical understanding or exploring the history would reveal much better light on what is the present situations are. What is the present situations are. So let's begin with the analyzing the situations of understanding the context of the 1973 oil crisis. The situation of 1973, the oil crisis. Okay. There are three different factors which led to the understanding of the energy. Three different aspects or three different set of events which influenced the development as well as the energy strategies in India. So I'll be explaining that. What is that? Three different events or three different contexts. The oil crisis is one of the events or one of the phenomena. Okay, the first phenomenon, the first event is that it's something which is more associated with the downturn of Fordism and Keynesian economic theory. Basically, the very idea of the Keynesian or the central logic of the Keynesian theory is that to facilitate or to foster the consumer demand. As much as possible, the consumer demand we would foster, and it would lead to the much better economic growth rate. Okay, this is what. So how to foster this? There are three factors through which the consumer demand can be fostered. One is you spend more amount of money. That means spending high amount of deficit spending. The government should spend more amount of money. The next one is that it's the infrastructure facilities. Take more number of initiatives in the infrastructure facilities. Try to foster the education. So these three events, these three aspects which could lend or create a mass demand Okay, so that through the mass demand, what we can create is that we can create an economic growth. This is a very simplistic, very minimalistic understanding of the Keynesian theory. Okay. On the other hand, what happened was that it's a downturn with the Fordism. First of all, we have to, if you want to understand the Fordism, you have to understand the production economics or the producers behavior. One is understanding the producers behavior or the production economics, which could lend light on what is this Fordism is all about. What is this? The Fordism is all about. How this Fordism is linked to the consumer demand. Okay. The first idea is that the very idea, the very logic, the inherent logic of the Fordism is that it fosters the mass production. That means you produce more number of goods. Okay, you produce the more number of goods which if you produce, the cost would come down. The cost of the product would come down. This is possible with the technological innovation. So the mass production is highly dependent on the new technologies, new set of technologies. So the new incorporating technologies within the production structure which could reduce the factor of cost. So this is something which is not the investment which is in the short-term investments. It's a long-term investment. That the long-term investment in terms of the fixed capital. Okay, so primarily, if you look at this, the idea of the mass productions and the cost, this is something which is related to the economies of scale. The economies of scale is directly related to the cost and the production process. P and the C process. At the same time, the economies of scale is also something which is related to the idea of efficiency. So what is this efficiency? The very idea of the efficiency here is that the efficiency is in terms of an input-output factor. What is the input and what should be the output? So the focus is on that. Lesser the input, higher the output. How it is possible? This is possible much with the replacement or the substitution which can happen. This is the substitution in terms of the technology replacing the labor. Technology replaces labor power. When the technology replaces the labor power or the substitutions, what happens is that one factor of change in the input which leads to the change in the output. This is what something which is called as a kind of an elasticity of the output. So that output change is because of the substitutions in the product which you introduce into the process of the production. So the technology replaces the labor power. When the technology replaces the labor power, what it indirectly refers to is that this efficiency could be achieved with technology. This efficiency could be achieved with the technology, but to run this technology, we need energy. Okay, we need energy. That's why we are moving from a transformation animate energy to an inanimate sources. Animate sources to inanimate production process. So we have become a more kind of in the technology intensified. What is the implication of this is that the technology intensified production is an energy intensified production. Technology intensified production become energy intensified production. This is the first one, which is the technology replaces the labor. The second one is that because of this replacement of the technology, okay, the technology intensified production becomes an energy intensified production. What happened in this process is that on the one hand, the production has increased. The production has increased enormously. At the same time, the employment has declined. The rate of employment growth has declined. When there is a decline in the economic opportunities, what happens is that the income generation becomes a kind of a stagnation. There is a problem with the standardized income generations. When the income generation becomes more stagnant in nature, what happens is that what is supposed to be mentioned by the consumer demand, the demand in the consumer market comes down. Demand in the consumer market declines, but on the other hand, the production process has increased. Okay, the production process has increased. I'm just moving this point to here. Okay, this is not something which is a kind of a production which is increased within one firm. You look at something which is, we need to think very deeper within the global perspective or kind of the global economic point of view. Okay, well, one is that during this period of a time, okay, during this period of a phase, for instance, 1950s, 1945 to 1973, newly independent states have emerged. When the newly independent states have emerged, the newly independent states have emerged and enter into the production process. Directly, they were into the production process. So what happened was that every country started producing, every country in the process of production. Okay, that means the more the production, lesser the demand. And the supply was higher, but the production, or on the other hand, the demand is very less. So when this equation has happened, and slowly the economy went into the stagnation. Went into the stage of stagnation. This is one side. This is the completely one side of the coin. So the one side of the coin is that it attempts to understand the theory of production within the firm, or the firm, how the firm engaged with the production process. So when you understand the firm's engagement with the production process, what happens here is that you are trying to understand that the firm's production process at three levels you are trying to understand. Three levels of the production process understanding the production process. And the first level of an understanding is that it's more of a specification of the production. The first very idea is that what is the specification of the production? What specification or what kind of a guidelines that each firm is supposed to follow? The specification is the specification of production. The specification is very detailed. The first idea, the specification in terms of, for instance, the better understanding of the factors of production. As well as the relations of the production. The factors and the relations of production are clearly outlined in the firm's production process. The second As it is, the specification of the production is clearly outlined the what should be the factor of production, at the same time what should be the relations of the production. It focused highly on the cost minimization. Cost minimization. That cost minimization is that the very fundamental logic is that, as I explained, is that the technology investment is something which is perceived as the long-term investment. At the same time, the labor investment, which is perceived as very short-term and recurring in nature. This is non-recurring. This is recurring in nature. That means rather than investing in the labor power, invest more on the technology power. So this has linked to the utility maximization. Maximize your profit. Utility maximization, or maximize your profit as much as you can. That the maximization is that is possible, that utility maximization is possible when the efficiency rate is higher. Lower the efficiency and lower the utility maximization is. So this is the very, very inner order or inner logic of the capital reproduction. Where every firm started adopting the same set of principles, okay, without trying to understand how these principles would affect at the macro level. That means it's more kind of a micro level. Micro level engagement or the micro level production process created ripple effects at the macro level, which is the reason for the stagnations during this period of time. That's why the sociologists primarily would call it as a kind of the middle class, the emergence of new middle class. Okay, new employment opportunities which witnessed in America, which saw a kind of a declining trend in the year of, or in the post 1960s, 1965, 1960s onwards. Okay, so the very idea is that how to reorganize this, or how to restabilize this, the capitalist crisis, in a capitalist crisis. This is the first one of the events. The second one is more associated with the oil crisis. That comes to the second set of an event. The second set of an event deals with oil embargo. That means you put certain sort of a kind of the stoppage, or you are trying to prevent the transformation or kind of a transportation of an oil or a transportation of the resources from one place to another place. This oil embargo is part of the cartelization. Part of the cartelization. That means a kind of a cartel. That means, for instance, in the local market, each sellers would come to a common agreement that I am going to sell a particular product for this particular price. Suppose I want to sell a kind of the choppies at the cost of 10 rupees. Okay, I will be like able to give a kind of instructions to all the sellers within the market that you are supposed to sell this particular product for only for the 10 rupees. You should not increase it to the 11 rupees, or you should not decrease it to the kind of an 8 rupees or 9 rupees. So we are trying to fix this 10 rupees now to gain a kind of a monopolization. Or the political tactics to control the resources. Okay, so this cartelization is part of, for instance, the oil producing and exporting countries. Okay, the oil producing and exporting countries, for instance, the Arabian countries especially, the Arabian countries involved in the process of the cartelization. So normally the Arabian countries, a claim is that it's an Arabian countries monopolization or the political tactics which led to the oil crisis. No, there is a kind of an inner logic is that, or a kind of a second order understanding is that this cartelization basically to stop the war. This is the second order understanding. The first order is to gain the monopolization. The second order of an understanding is that it's to stop the war between Israel versus Palestine. The war between Palestine and the Israel. Okay, basically the Israel is like, there are different set of countries. First world countries try to defend the Israel, but the Arabian countries try to defend the Palestine. Okay, in order to stop the war, this monopolization or the cartelization is said to be showing a kind of solidarity among the Arabian nations or among the Middle East. So when you control the resources, what happens is that every production process depends on the resources, depends on the oil. So when you control the resources, the production will also come down. When the production comes down, the economic development will also come down. Okay, this is the very inner logic. So they try to hold the resources. But the third order of understanding is that yes, it is part of the monopolization. It is part of the solidarity, a kind of a political solidarity among the Arabian nations. But who is involved in all this process? It is a kind of a third order understanding which claims that it's more a kind of an American politics on controlling the Middle East. So when you control the Middle East, what happens is that you are able to control the resources. So for instance, the David Harvey or Andrew Gunder, Frank's work, they attempt to examine this situation is that they try to claim that, for instance, David Harvey's understanding is that it was the 10% in 1940s and all, the US was trying to control the 10% of the oil resources. 10% of the oil resources in 1940s by America. But it went to, for instance, after in the post 1970s or the post 1973, the 90% of the oil resources were under the control of the US. So that means it is clearly visible is that how to re-stabilize the lost economy. It is completely the oil crisis. The oil crisis is a kind of an implication or a kind of an consequences to stabilize the lost or the crisis of capitalism or the crisis of the economic production, especially with related to the US. Okay, so the oil crisis is used or employed as an instrument to destabilize this order, improve the production, improve the economic development of a particular country or a particular nation state. So this is the more the logic of the economic crisis. The third set of an event, there is a third set of an event which created another level of unconsciousness. The third set of an event created another consciousness is that it's a limits to growth. The limits to growth was a report. This particular report reflected on the first. Consciousness is about the resources which are finite in nature. Second, it created a certain consciousness of environmental degradation, higher level of environment degradation due to unsustainable production process and the consumption. Unsustainable production and consumption. For instance, in terms of the consumption is that use and throw culture. For instance, the pen, pencil and all, you'll be able to see again. A very good example. You use it, once it's over, you just throw it. Okay, that means the use and throw culture, which created a consciousness of the waste generations and the impact on the environment. Number third is that unscrupulous exploitation of the natural resources. The exploitation of the natural resources should be stopped. So this all some of this is the limits growth. These are some of the thought process, or these are some of the events. Different set of events created a kind of a consciousness. That consciousness is three set of events. That's the Fordism plus or downturn with Fordism and Keynesian economics plus the oil crisis plus the limits to growth created a kind of consciousness with regard to the energy. Energy has social, political, economic and environmental dimensions. This has three set of reflections. This has three different set of reflections. The first set of reflection is that energy scarcity as a social problem. When you have a lot of scarcity, resource scarcity, it leads to, for instance, conflicts as well as the contradictions. Different set of conflicts and contradictions which would result in getting the access to the resources. Okay, so the conflicts and contradictions are part of this energy scarcity. Number second is that energy, this is very crucial. One is about the scarcity. The second one is that energy dependency. This is the first question is that it's more kind of the question with the scarcity which leads to the conflict and contradictions, but at the same time the energy dependency, a kind of depending on the resources of external resources, that it leads to the unstable situations to the nation state development and create a kind of an unstable situation to nation state development. Which means if you want to develop the nation state, that means it should be more self-reliant in nature. We should create our own resources. Create more a set of independent resources you created. The third is that energy consumption or unsustainable energy consumption leads to the environmental degradation. Environmental degradation and unsustainable lifestyle. Okay. These three different set of an understanding which has emerged with the three different set of events. That's one with a kind of a downturn with the Fordism or kind of a failure for Fordism, and then if you look at the oil crisis, the situation of the oil crisis, and the consciousness with reference to the limits to growth. Okay, so what happened was that the idea of scarcity, the idea of dependency, the idea of consumption as well as the production become part of the development strategies. How to address the scarcity, how to address the dependency, and how to address the consumptions and production. Okay, and this all went into the very idea of how to securitization of the state. This securitization process is that the security is not in terms of protecting the people, not in terms of the military protections only. The securitization is also about, for instance, how to create new set of resources, that it deals with the very idea of, for instance, creating an economic security. That economic security as social security. This on the other hand, for instance, on the other idea is that when you produce a kind of a sustainable, or when you produce a kind of an environment friendly resources, or environment friendly generating energy sources, which could also produces the health security, the health as well as the idea of energy linked with this. Okay, so based on this very idea, the developmental strategies have been formulated. Based on the very idea of scarcity, dependency, plus production and consumption. Okay, based on this, we have formulated a new different set of development strategies. Three different set of new development strategies have been formulated. The first development strategies is that to develop new sectors. New sectors should be initiated. New sectorial development should be initiated. The second is that new economic strategies and ideologies that new set of theories have started emerging. New set of theories started emerging during this period. What is this new set of development of new sectors? For instance, during this context, during this particular context in the 1970s and 1970s onwards, you will be able to see that the emergence of various sectors, for instance, the IT manufacturing divides into, for instance, the hardware as well as the software started emerging. The next is that the biotechnology initiatives. Along with IT, however, yes, there is an electronic industries. The growth of electronic industries were also facilitated during this particular period of time. It's a biotech, and then the pharmaceutical industry, pharma industries. So what you do is that by introducing different set of industries, new set of industries, you try to stimulate more number of production process and more number of the product production, and then the consumption. You sustain the economic development. This particularly happened. And the next one was on that it's a new economic strategies. These new economic strategies are based on three different aspects. The first one is that it's liberalization. The second one was on the privatization. The first one was on the liberalization, the second one was on the privatization, and the third one was very crucial, very fundamental to this liberalization and privatization is that the globalization. Without globalization, it is impossible to visualize the liberalization as well as the privatization. Okay, the first is that the liberalization is about opening the economy. Opening the economy to foreign products or foreign companies. Foreign products as well as the foreign companies. The second one is that restrict the state participation. Restrict the state participation in the market. So that means more the private firms which would create the development. That means we are looking for the private capital investments, looking for the participation of private capitals in market. The third idea was very crucial, fundamental to this one was that the globalization. The globalization is about not with one factor. It's with the globalization is with the people. It's with the technology. It's with the culture. It's also with the finance. That's a capital. Okay. So you cannot bring, for instance, the inner logic of this economic strategy is that you cannot bring a kind of a private capitals or you facilitate private capital unless there is a mobility of the finance or mobility of the capital. So what we are expecting is that there should be the mobility of the capital. That there is a mobility of the capital, and directly the privatization can emerge, because at local we have a kind of a shortage of capitals. So this shortage of capitals could be addressed by bringing the capital from outside. So this is more a kind of the flow of capitals. The flow of capital, the shortage of capital could be addressed through the external capitals. The next one is that with the technology. For instance, during this period of time, the technology developments, especially like we have very few technology developments, and by that time actually always the first world countries or the developed countries have gone far ahead of us in the technologies. Okay, so that we could able to bring those technologies to the local by opening the economy. At the same time, when there is a movement of the people, when there is a movement of the people, when there is a kind of a mobility of the people from one place to another place, one geographical location to the other geographical location, what happens is that the cultural transformation happens. The cultural transmission happens. So we go there, we learn the culture, and we come back, and then we try to imitate, we try to adopt whatever the culture which is practiced in the Western countries, and we try to come here and we try to practice the same here. For instance, eating pizzas or kind of a Coke or kind of any of this, and at the same time, whatever we practice it here, for instance, yoga, for instance, Ayurveda, and like the culture which is transferred from local to the global, global to the local, which could happen. This is what the movement. This is what the movement which we are trying to think. With the new economic strategies and ideologies, we are trying to look at the global to local, as well as the local to the global transformation from this to this idea. Then the third set of, then there is a kind of a third set of theories which emerged. New set of theories which emerged is that trying to look at what is alternative development. What is alternative development? What is appropriate technology? Simultaneously introducing the very idea of, for instance, along with the appropriate technology, introduce the idea of the green and clean society, sustainable life practices, these all have been introduced during this period of time. That means, on the one hand, we try to introduce industry. First, this is a very crucial point. On the one hand, we try to introduce